In early December 1941, World War II truly became a global conflict when the United States finally plunged directly into the war against Nazi Germany. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th prompted President Franklin D. Roosevelt to submit a declaration of war to Congress, initially only against Japan. Adolf Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany, quickly responded with a dramatic move. On December 11, 1941, Hitler addressed the Reichstag, accusing the United States of being under the control of the eternal Jews and blaming Roosevelt for various crimes against Germany. That day, Germany declared war on the United States, effectively ending Hitler's years-long efforts to avoid direct confrontation with America's industrial power. The United States' entry into the war provided fresh energy to the Allies. With abundant natural resources and a massive industrial base, America swiftly shifted to a total war economy. Factories in the U.S. operated around the clock, producing weaponry on an extraordinary scale, sufficient to supply its own needs and even arm the other allies. Amid this colossal military struggle, a fierce propaganda war also raged. Both sides sought to influence morale and public opinion through radio broadcasts, pamphlets, and other media. Ironically, there were individuals from the Allied side who betrayed their own and aided the enemy's propaganda. One of the most infamous traitors was William Brooke Joyce, a British-American man who chose to become a mouthpiece for the Nazis. William Joyce, nicknamed Lord Haw-Haw by the British public, betrayed his country by broadcasting anti-British propaganda on behalf of Nazi Germany. William Brooke Joyce was born in Brooklyn, New York on April 24, 1906, to British parents. Although born in America, young William only spent the first 3 years of his life there. In 1909, his family returned to their homeland in Galway, Ireland. William's teenage years coincided with the turmoil of the Irish War of Independence. In the conflict between Irish Republicans and British rule, teenage William sided with the British. He was even recruited by British Army intelligence as a courier in 1921. His allegiance nearly cost him his life. One day, on his way home from school, William was ambushed and nearly killed by IRA members. This serious threat to his safety led a British officer, Captain Patrick Keating, to send the young William to England to protect him from the guerrilla warfare in Ireland. In England, William Joyce continued his education. He was known for his intelligence and pursued studies at Birkbeck College, London. However, his bitter experiences in Ireland and the political situation of the 1920s shaped his extreme views. Young Joyce was drawn to fascism, which was emerging in Europe at the time. An incident in London further solidified his radical resolve. At a political meeting, Joyce was attacked by a group of communists who slashed his cheek with a razor blade, leaving a permanent long scar from his ear to the corner of his mouth. This facial scar became a lasting reminder of his hatred for communism. From then on, anti-communism and extreme nationalism were deeply ingrained in William Joyce, driving him to become active in fascist movements in Britain. In early 1932, Joyce joined the British Union of Fascists, BUF, led by Oswald Mosley, the British fascist party that idolized many of Benito Mussolini's tactics in Italy. Joyce quickly stood out due to his exceptional oratory skills. He was known as a masterful speaker who could ignite the passion of crowds. However, his career in the BUF was short-lived. After the 1937 London County Council elections, Mosley dismissed Joyce from his position. Joyce was furious at this treatment. Feeling betrayed, he split from the BUF and founded his own fascist party called the National Socialist League (NSL). Unlike Mosley's BUF, which maintained some distance from overt racism, Joyce's NSL was more extreme in its anti-Semitism and openly adopted German-style Nazism. However, his ambitions failed. The NSL attracted only a handful of followers and was opposed even by his fellow fascists. By 1939, the frustrated Joyce, sinking into alcoholism, finally disbanded the NSL. Just before World War II erupted, William Joyce took a bold step. In late August 1939, exactly a week before Nazi Germany invaded Poland, Joyce and his wife left England for Germany. Upon arriving in Berlin, William Joyce soon found his new calling. The Reich Ministry of Propaganda, led by Joseph Goebbels, recruited him as an English-language radio broadcaster. The Nazis realized that having a native Englishman spread propaganda would be highly effective in dividing enemy morale. Goebbels, who was searching for foreign propagandists to broadcast to Allied countries, saw Joyce as an ideal candidate. In Germany, William Joyce quickly transformed into the voice of the Nazis in English. His first broadcasts began shortly after World War II broke out in September 1939. In his early Germany calling broadcasts, Joyce sought to sow division within British society. He spread disinformation and provocative narratives, claiming that democracy in Britain was a pretense controlled by the upper class and Jews, and that British workers were merely oppressed pawns. He accused political and business elites, including Prime Minister Winston Churchill, of conspiring to oppress the common people for their own gain. William Joyce's unique voice tone soon captured the attention of listeners in Britain. A British radio critic at the time nicknamed him Lord Haw-Haw because his British accent sounded arrogant and mocking. Instead of angering everyone, Joyce's broadcasts were initially seen as entertainment by many Britons. By 1940, it was estimated that Lord Haw-Haw's broadcasts had up to 6 million regular listeners and 18 million occasional listeners in Great Britain, an extraordinarily large number, showing just how famous William Joyce's voice was in the homeland he had betrayed. However, over time, the effectiveness of Lord Haw-Haw's propaganda began to wane. Listeners in Britain gradually recognized the patterns of lies and bias in the broadcasts. Curiosity and amusement turned into disgust and hatred, especially as the war turned, particularly after the German Luftwaffe failed to subdue the RAF in the Battle of Britain and news of Nazi defeats on the Eastern Front. Joyce's words were increasingly seen as jokes or empty propaganda. Nevertheless, Joyce remained loyal in broadcasting Nazi propaganda until the very end of the war. He moved from studio to studio, from Berlin to various other German cities, to avoid Allied bombings. But the spring of 1945 marked the final chapter in the drama of William Lord Haw-Haw Joyce's life. The Third Reich was collapsing completely. Allied forces breached Germany from the west, while the Soviet Red Army encircled Berlin from the east. On the night of April 30, 1945, amid the destruction of the Battle of Berlin, William Joyce delivered his final broadcast from Radio Hamburg. In the recording that was later aired, Joyce sounded drunk and desperate, ranting against Britain and warning the German people of the dangers of the Soviet Union now threatening Europe. After the Nazis surrendered, Joyce attempted to flee and hide. He and his wife disguised themselves as civilian refugees and escaped to the northern German border near Flensburg. The area was chaotic, with many Nazi officials trying to hide or escape. On May 28, 1945, rumors spread among British troops that a couple with British accents had been spotted in the Flensburg countryside, strongly suspected to be the traitor Lord Haw-Haw and his wife. Realizing his identity was exposed, Joyce tried to reach into his back pocket, perhaps thinking he could show fake documents or even a weapon. Feeling threatened, a British lieutenant, Geoffrey Perry, fired a shot that hit Joyce's thigh. Joyce fell to the ground, groaning in pain from the gunshot wound. He was captured alive on the spot. It turned out that the item Joyce was trying to retrieve from his pocket was not a gun, but a fake German passport, his last failed attempt to avoid capture. The soldiers took the injured William Joyce to Allied headquarters, then flew him to London to face trial. Upon arrival in England, Joyce was immediately detained and charged with 3 counts of high treason. His case was somewhat legally complicated, given that he was born in America and had been a U.S. citizen. However, Attorney General Sir Hartley Shawcross presented a key argument. The fact that Joyce had held a British passport meant he had bound himself in allegiance to the king. Thus, the court ruled that Joyce had aided the king's enemies while still under allegiance to the king. In short, he was guilty of high treason. Finally, the curtain fell on Lord Haw-Haw. On the morning of January 3, 1946, at Wandsworth Prison in London, William Brooke Joyce was sentenced to death by hanging. He was 39 years old when his life ended on the gallows.